is Laura and welcome to my channel, Boundless Books. That's right, I did not completely disappear and forget about this channel. I am back, and today I'm here to talk about something that I find pretty exciting, and that is new releases in 2017. So today I've gathered up a list of books that have either just recently come out or books that will soon be coming out. And if this selection of books is anything to go by, I think 2017 is going to be a really good year for books, specifically for sequels. So without further ado, let's just dive into this list. The first book on the list is actually a book that I've mentioned in a previous reading wrap-up, and that is The Alchemist of Loom by Elise Kova, and this came out on January 10th. So I was pretty sneaky, and I actually procured an advance reader copy of this book. So I did read it in 2016, but technically it came out in January of 2017, so I'm including it on this list. I've read other books by Elise Kova in the past. She wrote this wonderful YA fantasy series called Air Awakens that I really enjoyed, and this book is equally awesome. Right off the bat, I was intrigued by the genre mash that is this book. It involves fantasy and steampunk and sci-fi and chimeras, so I was pretty much sold from the description of the book alone. The book follows a young woman named Ari, who is a vigilante chimera who lives on the land of Loom, and her planet is ruled by a race of beings who are magical called the Dragons, who live on essentially a floating island above the main planet of Loom. Ari is bent on destroying the dragons who've essentially subjugated her people and forced them into a very strict class system. However, Ari gains an unlikely ally in the form of a seemingly incompetent dragon who has come to Loom to help the Fen 3 people gain their freedom. There's a lot to like about this book. I think one of Elise Kova's strengths is in her character development. Also, a lot of really interesting world building going on in this book. I really like the main character of Ari. She's strong-willed, self-sufficient, very intelligent, a tinkerer, somebody who likes to build and invent things. I also found Kavari, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, to be a really interesting foil to Ari's character. Elise Kova does some really interesting things with gender politics and gender norms in this book, which I actually found incredibly refreshing, in addition to just all the really interesting steampunk world building that was going on. This definitely appears to be the start of a series, as the plot was left pretty unresolved at the end, but I fell in love with the characters and I'm definitely going to stick around and keep on reading. And I noticed that for Elise Kova's Air Awakens series, she seemed to write the books pretty quickly, so I get the sense that she's a fairly prolific writer, and I'm hoping that I don't have to wait too long to dive back into this world. Moving right along, the next book that I want to talk about is one that I was really excited to start reading, and that is The Dark Days Pact by Alison Goodman, and this is the second book in the Lady Helen series. It is a little obscene how excited I was to get my hands on this book. I've talked about this series a lot in previous videos, so I'm just going to link to one of those on the screen somewhere for you to check out rather than summarize this series yet again. But on a high level, it is a historical fantasy series that follows a young woman named Lady Helen, and she is slaying demons, so awesome. This novel picks up a few months after the end of the first in the series and just dives right back into the action. We get to see a little bit of what Lady Helen's training looks like. Also, her relationship with Lord Carlston starts to develop a little bit further. In general, this was the perfect follow-up to the first book. I was not disappointed in all of the months that I waited for it to come out. I read this book in one night. It's pretty disgusting. I started reading it probably around like 9, stayed up until like 5 in the morning just downing this novel. I'm probably gonna have to go back and read it again just because I read it so quickly. But I read the first book twice and it was just as enjoyable the second time as it was the first time, so I'm sure I'll do the same with the second book in the series, probably right before the third one's about to come out, just to refresh my memory. Moving right along, the next book on this list is Starfall by Melissa Landers, and this is the second book in the Starflight series, and this came out on February 7th. I read Starflight back in early 2016 when it first came out, so I definitely need to read it again before I pick up this next book in the series, but I really enjoyed it and I thought the genre was really fun. It's pirates in space, sort of like Firefly. The novel follows a young woman named Solara, who is an ex-felon, and she's trying to escape her past and start afresh by traveling to the outer realms. However, in order to do so, because Solara is quite short on funds, she joins up to be the servant of a very rich, obnoxious boy whom she used to go to school with named Doran Spalding. In the first novel, there's definitely that very stereotypical love-hate relationship between Solara and Doran that's very typical in YA novels. That being said, I still found it incredibly enjoyable to read and was just well done, and the banter was enjoyable. So based on what I can gather, having read the synopsis of Starfall online, it seems like this book now follows two different protagonists. However, they are related to the first two protagonists from the first book, and the overarching plot line from the first book will be continued on. Sometimes I find when the author switches to a new set of characters, I lose some interest. That being said, the first book was so enjoyable that I'm definitely going to give this next one a try. The next book that I would like to talk about is another sequel, and it is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, and this is the third and final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. Similar to the Lady Helen series, this is another series that I've talked about in a number of my previous videos, so I will link those on the screen for you guys to check out. But it has an incredibly cool premise. It is set in an alternate version of London called Red London and follows a character named Kel who can jump between various versions of London. There is our mundane London, there is White London where magic has been leached out of everything, and there is Black London which has just been destroyed and completely decimated by magic. So I really enjoyed the first book in this series, and I absolutely loved the second book. It was so good. I loved all of the character development that happened in the second book. I loved how the author delved a lot into the magic system and how people use and execute magic. I've already started the third book and I'm enjoying it. You'll probably notice that there's a little hesitancy in my voice as I say that, and that's primarily due to the fact that I'm finding that the third book in the series switches between perspectives quite a lot, and it's feeling a little disjointed to me. I tend to steer clear of fantasy books that switch between a whole mass of different character perspectives, sort of like Game of Thrones. I find that things like Game of Thrones are incredibly enjoyable to watch. However, when I'm reading, I'll get really into one of the narratives, and then 100 pages, 200 pages will go by before we can kind of pick that narrative thread up again, and that tends to be pretty frustrating for me. All of that being said, I'm 100% going to finish reading this book because I'm really hooked on the overarching storyline, and I'm incredibly interested to see how it concludes. Additionally, a very interesting fact about one of the main characters was revealed at the end of the second book in the series, and the author is definitely diving more into that in this book. So I'll let you guys know when I'm done with it overall what my rating of the final book in the series is. The next book on this list is, you guessed it, another book in a series, and that is The Song Rising by Samantha Shannon, and this is the third book in the Bone Season series, and it comes out on March 7th, and I could not be any more excited about it. I'm fairly certain that this series is planned to be around 7 novels or so, but I'm incredibly optimistic because so far the series has been freaking awesome and I loved it. I've talked about this series a little bit in the past, and I have to say that this is probably one of the most innovative sci-fi / fantasy novels that I've read in an incredibly long time. The series is set in an alternative future version of London. The main character in this series is a young woman named Paige Mahoney, and she has joined up with one of the notorious gangs within the city of London. I don't want to say too much more about this series besides that, but needless to say, it goes in some crazy directions. However, the author does such an amazing job of sprinkling in street slang and various complicated descriptions of magic systems without feeling overwhelming or confusing. I just was kind of blown away by how good of a job the author does in integrating all of this world building and information within the span of the first novel without overwhelming the reader. I'm not entirely sure too much about what happens in the third book, but honestly I don't really want to read the synopsis of it. I just want to start reading it blind and see where the story goes. The 6th and final book on this list is The Bone Witch by Chupeco, and this also comes out on March 7th. So this is another book that I was pretty sneaky and got an advanced reader copy of, so I've already read it, and I can say already that I really enjoyed it. That being said, I went into this book not realizing that it was going to be the start of a series, so I was pretty freaking disappointed when it ended on such a cliffhanger. So definitely go and read it, but just prepare yourself for a cliffhanger. This novel has a really interesting setting. It's based in a world that's very heavily influenced by Japanese culture. It's obviously fictitious, but the author is clearly getting influence from lots of different kind of Japanese traditions. The novel has an interesting narrative structure. It's told from the perspective of a young woman named T, who is reflecting on her rise to power, or infamy, I should say. And T is notable because she has the power of necromancy, or as she is referred to within her society in a somewhat derogatory fashion, as a bone witch. There are various different kinds of magical abilities, and those who can wield them are called the Asha. And T has the least desirable of all of these Asha qualities. However, despite many of the backward notions that people have about bone witches, T is taken in by the Ashas and trained in a very geisha-like fashion to take on the magical traditions of an Asha, and she has to learn things like etiquette and dancing, and how to be political and converse with others while still furthering her knowledge of her necromantic abilities. Definitely think I might have made up the word necromantic. Gotta look that up. Is that a word? I really liked the writing style and the narrative structure of this book. The whole novel felt sort of like this fairy tale that was unveiling before us, and I loved the tension between T in the future and T as a young girl. So I'm definitely intrigued to see where the series goes, but I am majorly bummed out that I'm gonna have to wait a pretty long time until the next book comes out, given that the first book technically isn't even out yet. So there you guys have it. That is just a little taste of some of the books that I'm really looking forward to in 2017. I'll definitely give you guys updates as I read books that I've mentioned on this list that are not out yet. So if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you have not done so already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can stay up to date with all of my latest content. And until next time, my name is Laura, and thank you guys so much for watching. Bye! First book was so enjoyable that I'm definitely going to give this next one a try.